Hello and welcome back to the Out of Spec Podcast channel. We are here with another recap. We're here today with Team Model S Plaid. Just a couple months ago, we took 10 vehicles, one combustion vehicle, 9 electric vehicles across the United States on Interstate 90, driving from Seattle all the way to Boston. And I think one of the most interesting vehicles has got to be the Tesla Model S Plaid. So we have Ryan, Andy, and Matt. Model S Plaid team, how are you guys doing today?
Doing well.
No complaints.
Wunderbar.
Awesome. I'll start off. What were your guys' first impressions? I'll start off with you, Matt. When Kyle called and said, hey, you're going to be on, I want you for the I-90 Surge. Can you drive the Model S Plaid?
It was fantastic. You know, he didn't tell me which car I was going to be in right from the get-go. I didn't find that out really until, I think it was like an hour or two before I was getting on the plane. And I was really excited to be on the Model S team because it's a car that I'm familiar with. It's a car that I knew. But I was also a little disappointed because I didn't get to experience a different car. I was looking forward to trying something that I hadn't been in before. And coming from 2 Teslas before my current car, I kind of knew what I was getting into. So it was both a good thing and a little disappointing at the same time. But my excitement for the trip was unreal. It's something I've always wanted to do, which is just a crazy road trip and something that few people I don't think have ever done other than us.
You're on mute. I see.
Been muting back and forth. Awesome. Alrighty. What about you, Ryan? What was your reaction when Kyle hit you up?
Yeah, just a little inside baseball. I had the opportunity to choose between a few different ones. I've got a lot of experience in plenty of different EVs, a lot of experience with different route planners, optimizing them. So I do have a good bit of knowledge, not to toot my own horn, but I kind of had a few options as to what I wanted to be in. And I chose the Plaid specifically, mostly for the Tesla supercharging network. I really think that it's a lot easier to charge with that. I'm grateful that we had pretty smooth experiences. And yes, we did use a lot of CCS charging, but the Tesla supercharger network is still an advantage that I'm pretty happy with.
And we'll get into the Tesla supercharging network in a second, especially the huge advantage you guys have in infrastructure. But Andy, yeah, what was your impression?
My impression? I'm driving Tesla since 2015. So I had multiple Teslas, Model S, Model Y, Model X, and so on. Currently driving a Cybertruck. My wife is actually driving the exact same cars, exact same spec, Model S Plaid. With the black, everything exactly the same. So it felt like I was in my wife's car, to be honest. But when I was being invited, that came really quite quickly because I met Andreas at the X Takeover and we talked about it. And then, like a few weeks later, he said, hey, you interested? And then Kyle contacted me. And I was hopping from, I think first it was the Mercedes that I was supposed to be in, then it was the forgotten Genesis, the G80. And so I actually prepared, I downloaded the manual for the G80 and looked up some videos and so on. And then, lo and behold, I ended up in the Model S Plaid, which I didn't really have to study for at this point. So. But that came about just like a day before, so the night, yeah, pretty much.
But safe to say you guys all have experience in Teslas, particularly like supercharging the route planner. So, okay, you guys have a little bit of advantage there. I was talking to the G80 team. They had never been in this vehicle before, only read some things about it. And so things like that, kind of a little weird. But before we get into the numbers, before we get into the supercharging experience, if you guys want to formally introduce yourselves, I'll start off with you, Matt, kind of your experience with electrification, road tripping in EVs, and what made you really want to do this trip.
Yeah, so I've been all EVs since about 2016. I had a 2016 Model S 60, which was unlocked up to a 75. Then I had the 2018 Model X, and now I'm in a 23 F-150 Lightning extended range. Reason I had made the switch over to electrification was purely for a cost of operation standpoint. Both my job then and now being self-employed, everything to me was about our cost of operation, how much it was costing us when I was driving 25, 30,000 miles a year. It just made much more sense to be in an EV. So that's when I started making the switch. And the original Model S, I would consistently bump up against the range limitations on it because it was realistically good for about 160, 180 miles with a smaller battery and older technology. So we just kept upgrading, and as the family needed bigger stuff and getting bigger stuff, we needed bigger vehicles. So now I'm in the truck. But electrification in itself it's become my passion. It was so much more back then. It was just a cost of operation thing. Now it's a lifestyle. I mean, it's a hobby. It's something that I have fully immersed myself into. I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to charging and when it comes to optimization and really getting the most out of our vehicle. And I think because of that has led me to, get to know Kyle a little bit and have opportunities like this starting to come up, which is amazing. And like I said, at the beginning, it's something that I've kind of always wanted to do, which is just some extreme electric road tripping, which is so much fun to me.
Awesome. Andy, what about you?
Like I said earlier, I started out in 2015. I owned a BMW X6 and I was commuting to work with this quite far, probably a distance of, I would say, like 50 miles one direction. And it was in 2014 or so when the gas prices here in Georgia were kind of like they are in California all the time or so. And I paid about $500 to $600 on gas each month just for commuting. And I was thinking, there has to be something better. And I always wanted to have the Model X, and it wasn't really available at this point. But my wife said, "Why don't you just test drive the P85D?" Which I did, and I placed an order right away after the test drive. And that's when I switched over to Tesla, to EVs. And ever since 2015, I'm driving EVs. And my first road trip was like 2 days in of having the Model S, and I charged all the way up to 100% on every charger because I was so, the range anxiety was real at this point. But since then, I mean, I have changed. And with my Cybertruck now that I have since June, I already drove like 19,000 miles on road trips. And 13,000 or 15,000 of it without any assistance other than the cruise control. So yeah, I'm doing road trips. I can say that at least 20,000 miles a year easily. So
All right, some long distance drivers here, Matt and Andy. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I owned a EV for several years. I think 4 years. And I'm working with Out of Spec, of course. I'm running the Out of Spec testing channel now, and I've had the opportunity to drive and really experience and try to get the most out of a lot of different cars, a really wide variety, everything from like a Fiat 500e to a Lucid Air. So fortunate to have a lot of breadth of experience, and additionally, plenty of road trip experience. I have family out in California, so I make that trip every year, and yeah, familiar with all the road trips, races to Vegas. So something that I'm familiar with for sure.
Great. Okay. I'm hoping to elaborate more into some of your experiences here, but let's kind of get into some of the numbers. You guys arrived in Boston at 3:43 p.m. with a time of 49 hours and 23 minutes, about 3 miles every single kilowatt hour. Now, I'll go on the averages here. You arrived at every station stop at about 7.5%, and you departed with about 50% state of charge. Now, compared to some of the other ranges that I've seen here, for instance, the G80, they would go to 80 every time, and on average, they would arrive at 20%. Or even the Ioniq, they were often at as close as 1%, 0% on multiple occasions, and rose up all the way to 75. For you guys, what was your strategy going in that had you, on average, right? Getting there at about 7.5% and leaving with a 50% state of charge.
Well, the strategy go was how low can you go, basically. So we tried to come as close as we can to 1% or 2%. But as we mentioned earlier, we had some issues with the BMS in the beginning, and our confidence level was very low at this point. So rather than, with the strategy of coming in very low, we ended up using a better route planner to double check our numbers. And so we did this for, I think, the first 500 to 600 miles. And then later in, the BMS was so spot on that we could really do what we wanted to do in the very beginning. And I think it was costing us some time because our charges that we wanted to go to, we ended up in, I think the first one was Spark or so, where we ended up, where we didn't really want to go. We thought we could make it to Spokane, but then everything changed, and it kind of, disrupted our whole flow in the beginning. But we got back on the flow.
Yeah, one of the beautiful things about the Tesla system, right, is it's all on screen. So once we made that first stop, we could make an instantaneous adjustment into understanding where we were going. Our problem then, though, at the beginning was, like Andy just said, we were having issues with the route projection being so far off from a percentage of arrival that we were having to pretty much manually do it. But it took us 2 or 3 of our first charging stops to really start understanding where we were at from an efficiency perspective and just how far off Tesla's system was. So one of the beautiful things about their software is it made it easy to make those adjustments right on the spot and right there. We didn't really have to spend more than a couple of minutes each charging stop strategizing to where the next one was going to be. But we definitely lost time. There were a couple of charges where we came in at, I think, over 20% state of charge on one of them. And then we had some others to where we had to adjust our speed down for a good 10 miles an hour and 15 miles an hour under the speed limit for 100-mile stretches just in those first couple of charging stops because the Tesla system was so far off for projecting what we were doing.
I also wanted to add a couple things. One of them is we didn't want to arrive too low. With the Model S, it actually does something if you start charging at 0%. It'll hold 150, 155-ish kilowatts all the way until about 10%. But if you plug in at 1 or 2%, it'll be shorter. And the closer to 10%, the shorter the amount of time you're at 150 kilowatts it is. So it's not ideal to arrive completely dead. So you do want to have a little bit. And we generally unplugged. I think you said the average was about 50%. And I think that sounds about right for us because right around there is when the charging speed really starts to taper off and charging is well under 150 kilowatts. And it makes sense to make it onto the next charger. Generally speaking, we would try to aim for something about 120-ish miles between charges.
Perfect. Okay. All right. I'm going to take a pause here. But all right. Now let's go into some of the route planning of the Tesla. Ryan, you and me literally just the other day talked about how well Tesla does route planning. Something I hear from a lot of the other teams, which of course are CCS, using CCS infrastructure, and aren't as software defined as Tesla, they did not depend on the route planner as much as the average user would. It wasn't showing certain stations, which messed up with its ability to precondition, which gave it slowing charger rates. I want to know, did you guys rely on the route charger solely? I know you guys mentioned using a better route planner, some as well, but was your confidence solely in the route planner?
We initially started with that, but very quickly we ran into that problem that we discussed where it just said that we had enough charge unplugged, and basically immediately once we start driving, the projected state of charge arrival just was dropping really, really quickly, and it was really concerning. And we wouldn't have made it if we didn't slow down by like 10 or 15 miles an hour for over 100 miles. So that was a bit of a bummer. But aside from that, I think the route planner generally was pretty solid. we used it pretty extensively and also used a better route planner to verify everything. And for the most part, it was very good at telling us where all the chargers were. One thing that Tesla lacks is integration with other charging networks. So when we went to an Electrify America, for example, we wouldn't be able to precondition the battery automatically or even manually, since that's not a feature. However, throughout the entire trip, it never needed to precondition, so it wasn't really a problem.
And that kind of calls back into what you're saying, Andy, right? The battery management system issues. Do you guys know specifically what the problem was with the BMS? Was the car actually telling you that it was a BMS issue? I know this is Kyle's Model S Plaid, so it's, kind of a wreck.
It's Kyle's fault.
It's seen a tough life.
Yeah, it didn't indicate anything was wrong. It just seemed like bad data, a bad guess. It didn't fully understand the way we were driving, something along those lines, but we didn't really have a super clear answer. And my understanding is that the Model 3 team did have similar problems in similar areas. So it could be
They had
something
it
with the
later.
Tesla.
Yeah, they had it later in the game, actually.
Yeah, so perhaps there's something wrong with the Tesla mapping system, but it's really difficult to tell exactly what happened.
Yeah, what was interesting, right, is that it was really the kind of the first 500 miles or so that it was really bad. And then when we got closer to Boston, it just all basically from Chicago on, it became very accurate. Like we were coming in within 2-3% of state of charge on what it was projecting every single time. And so we got back to trusting it then. But at the beginning, it was all about we're going to use the Tesla system to figure out where we're going. And then we're going to back it up with ABRP by inputting the manual. Ryan was handling that side of it. He'd input the manual efficiencies on the back end to map it out to exactly where we need to be based upon what we were seeing from the car. And then, of course, we would also be backing that up with checking plug share to make sure that the recent reviews and everything were accurate for the charging stops. Right. So it's kind of, I mean, I'm out of the Tesla world now with my own car, but it's standard for road trip procedure for me to always use what the car says, but then back it up with ABRP or plug share so that I have a secondary source of information, making sure that everything's accurate. I just don't want to show up at a charger and be left stranded, which has never happened. But again, still nice to be nice.
Okay. And I want to kind of segue this into infrastructure. We know how robust and reliable the Tesla supercharging network was. Something that I dealt with in a CCS vehicle was how far off some of the Electrify America stations were, kind of in some weird locations, really miles off away from the exit, versus what we saw from the Tesla supercharging network, which the chargers seemed to be kind of close to the exit. You guys were able to we had to use both Electrify America as well as Tesla supercharging, the Tesla supercharging network. First off, can you guys clarify?
I was just about to say we didn't have to, we chose to. So,
yeah. So I want to actually clarify. Yeah, if you guys can clarify why you guys chose to use Electrify America.
So, well, one problem is that obviously the Plaid has the capability to charge with 250 kilowatt. And we wanted to make use of it, and we didn't want to end up on those V2 chargers to only get 150 or even less, depending on how busy they are. If you have load sharing with the cabinets, sometimes even if there is nobody, they are also derated. And I think that's something the Model 3 team ran into, a whole site that was really slow. And we didn't really want to do this, but it's also a gamble because with Electrify America, you never really know. It can say the station is online, and then you get there and it's not. So it was kind of a gamble, but I think we calculated the risk, and we thought it's better to onboard 250 kilowatts as quickly as we can, or kilowatt hours, instead of only getting 150 and therefore being longer at the charger. And I don't know if the strategy is wrong to do what we did, or rather pick a deep charge on 150. Um, I don't think we lost a lot of time, if so, at all.
You know what was interesting to me too is at the beginning, the Electrify America stations were much further off the freeway, but when we got further into kind of, and I can't remember what part of the country it is, we started noticing that superchargers were pretty far off the highway in some places too that we ended up stopping at,
Yeah.
especially to avoid the V2s. And it was an interesting kind of experience because we were used to the other side of it, which is that superchargers always in the most convenient locations, right on and off the highway. But there were a couple where we were having to go a mile or two off of the freeway just to get to the superchargers. And with the Electrify Americas, it's kind of there. But just like Andy was saying, our entire strategy was how can we onboard as much power as quickly as possible. And that was our focus, not necessarily the distance to and from the freeway. We did end up driving, I think it was 4 miles further than the Team Model 3 did. But we also charged a lot more than they did because they were so much more efficient. We charged I think 28 times. I think we stopped and charged. And please check my numbers. I'm pulling that off out of my head. And I know that they charged a lot less than we did from a standpoint of actually stopping. But again, much more efficient car than what we had.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add to for the viewers and listeners that when the video comes out, I will add a link to Google Drive where I put all those images from TestLab for the charging. So look out for that comment somewhere. If you can pin it, would be nice. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, everyone's links will be in the description below. So social media pages and YouTube, if you guys want to check that, they will be in the description. And I kind of want to segue this into some of the specific charging stops that you had. And so I'll kind of go back into our chart here. So I see for most of the time, you guys seem to have decent, smooth charges. But some of these stalls here, having to change stalls, 1A was yo-yoing, switch to 2B. Was this something that you saw a big comparative difference between Electrify in America and Tesla when it came to reliability or how well the chargers worked, especially on I-90? It's not as infrastructure dense as the West Coast or East Coast. But yeah, did you guys notice a big difference between the two?
I'm really shocked to say no. I spent a year doing Rate Your Charge, which really spent a lot of time focusing on the problems with charging, and I am all too familiar with broken CCS chargers, and we really didn't have too many problems. I think there was like some small stuff here and there, but for the most part, the CCS worked extremely well, and it was a really smooth experience. And we did have a few errors with the Tesla superchargers where we had to move stalls or didn't quite get the speeds that we were expecting. But really, I don't think we saw much of a difference in reliability. Both were exceptional.
Yeah, interestingly enough, the V4 supercharger station that we ended up was the worst in terms of the derating. So it really, at this point, we didn't have any other choice. It was full, and instead of 250, we got, I think, like 120-ish or so. It was really, really bad.
Yeah, it wasn't
So,
great. That was our second to last charging stop, I think.
yeah,
And
I
it
think
was
so.
at that point we pretty much knew where we were landing anyway. It was more kind of keeping the EQS behind us rather than us being able to catch anybody at that point. Especially because we knew our next charging stop was going to be really short and really fast for us to be able to get into Boston. But it also happened to be sitting right after I felt like that was a 5-mile stretch of bumper to bumper traffic that we sat in for a while.
Yeah.
So at that point, it was there's nothing we can do. We're stuck on this charger and we're not moving. And it was also a completely full site. Every single pedestal was full the entire time we were there.
I'll kind of segue this into some of your competition. I think people were really interested in seeing this race between the big three, that being the Plaid, the Lucid Air, as well as the Taycan. Did you guys expect a part of this race to be so close? Seeing the difference between, the Porsche was so far ahead, but the Model 3, the Ioniq, the EQS, as well as the Model S, things were actually kind of tightly compacted, as well as we have the Lucid that, right, was kind of so far behind. Even before they broke down, what were your kind of impressions? What were you expecting this race to head? Who you were expecting to be first, second, and third?
Well, I had a you on mute, Ryan. I had a speech that I gave, which didn't make it into the video because of audio issues, but I'm very willing to give this again. But let's hear Ryan
Let's do
first.
it.
No, go ahead, Andy. I'm really excited to hear it.
Well, you heard it already, um, which will probably upset lots of Tesla fanboys. But at some point in the race, I was saying, I think from what kind of, the outcome, expected outcome was at this point that the Taycan would be first and the Model 3 and Ioniq 6 would, you know, be second, third, or whatever. I was saying it actually makes sense to me that the Model S Plaid is not in the first league at this point, because if you think about it, the technology, is a bit older, especially versus Ioniq 6 and Model 3, and it would be kind of sad if we would come in second place or third place because there is no progress being made if you think about it. So I was sadly very comfortable with where we ended up in terms of it makes sense for the capabilities of the car, the charging, and everything that the Model 3 is so much ahead because Tesla, you know, progressed in technology and so on and got it more efficient. Yes, it's a smaller car, but I think even if we had the long range model that is being sold right now as the Model S, we wouldn't have been any better at this point. So it is well deserved, the ranking, in my opinion. It would be sad if it wasn't. So yeah.
Something that actually surprised me, I thought we were going to do very well, but that was largely because of my distrust of the CCS networks. I assumed that there would have been a lot more problems for the CCS cars. I would have thought there'd be lines, derated charging sessions, broken chargers, all these things that would have been huge losses of time. And really, that just never played out that much. Most people had really exceptional charging experiences for almost every single charging stop. And without that advantage, I definitely would agree with Andy. It's an older technology. The charging curve isn't great, and the efficiency, especially with the Plaid, is only okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. The wild card for me was the Model 3. I was not expecting them to do as well as they did. I don't have a lot of experience with the new Model 3s, especially. I do have experience with older Model 3s, and I was really surprised by that car. The Ioniq I was expecting to be right there with us. The Lucid I was expecting to be right there with us, and I knew that the Taycan was going to be so far ahead. Just it can onboard so much power. It's ridiculous. And it's just I don't know. It's kind of what I was expecting. I really wanted us to do better. I think we could have done, if we had been absolutely perfect, I think we would have seen maybe finishing 30 miles or being 30 miles ahead of where we ended up finishing. So a good 30 minutes faster. I don't think that we could have done much better than that. And
Yeah.
I think we gave that car every chance it had to win.
Yeah.
And it couldn't keep up. And like Andy said, it's older technology now. So it's interesting to me that the flagship of Tesla 2 got beat so crazily by the entry level Tesla.
Right. And if you think about it, I just wanted to point this out too. The Taycan, as fast as it can charge, I honestly think this whole argument about gas-powered car and electric car is mute at this point because nobody really road trips as we did. So nobody will be so crazy and go as low and not trust the car. But you will have stops even with a gas-powered car. We saw, yeah, they didn't play golf in the beginning, so some people were thinking the team Acura was slacking, but they actually didn't. And people have to use the restroom, you have to eat something in some way, and we cut really everything out. I brushed my teeth on the second day. or even on Sunday, the first time, again, because we never really had enough time. It was just kind of rotating around and using the restroom real quick, get something to eat. And then it was time to you didn't want to overcharge, because then, you leave time on the table at this point. So it is, we really reached an era right now where, with a Taycan, there is no holding back versus a gas-powered car. My strong opinion.
That's an interesting statistic. I'd be interested to know what our average charging stop was from a time perspective. Were we looking at 15 minutes? Were we looking at 18 minutes? Because it sure felt that way. I know
Yeah,
there are
we had
few of
stops
them
even
we've
with
said were
6
less than
minutes.
10 minutes.
We had 5 minutes, 6 minute stops. You can't even leave the car at this point.
Yeah, we ran into that to where we were overcharging because we were trying to go so quickly.
Well, I'm
Isaiah, you're
calculating
on
that.
mute.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm calculating that to actually see what your average time per stop was. I think it was an excellent point, Andy. Really, if you're actually going to be driving across the country from Seattle to Boston, you wouldn't do it near as fast as any of these cars. Even I think something like the old Model S is a lot more fast paced than what realistically people would want to do during a road trip. Whether it's using the bathroom or wanting to sit down and actually eat and not be on the go. And it's rare that you're going to have three people in a car who are rotating their, sleeping schedules to be able to get to a destination. Because realistically, at some point, you're going to want to stop for a couple hours and take a nap. So I think it's a great point, right? Realistically, no one's actually going to be driving of these lengths. But I'll pull this up here. And so on average, you guys stopped for about 14 minutes.
Yeah,
Sounds about right.
that's what it felt like. It was running to the bathroom and running back to the car and get back in the car and drive.
And if you
Which
look at
one can
something,
see? I mean, we had stops where we already left the charger to pick somebody up who was still, coming in with the food or so.
Mm-hmm.
right, yeah, someone's going off and you're speeding past, the car's already charged, and we're picking them up. If we look at the Acura, for instance, a lot of their stops were 2-3 minutes. And again, yeah, even 15 minutes that a lot of us EVs did, that you guys did, that's really not enough, realistically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with the Taycan, in 3 minutes they can probably drive another 100 miles or so when they when they charge. It's so crazy.
How long did it take the combustion engine car to really get in first place? Because I feel like it was 700, 800 miles for them to really kind of all of a sudden start getting their lead. Do we have that number?
So let's see, I'll actually pull this up here. You guys can't see it, but I have a whole... All right, so the Acura, open here. So the Acura got to Post Falls. I use that as a measurement. Post Falls, Idaho, at 7 p.m. And if I use the Porsche, for example, let's see here, Post Falls. Okay, so at this point, Post Falls, the Porsche is still ahead. Maybe move a little forward. Let's see. Three Forks, Montana. Okay, so yeah. So by Montana, the Acura was fully ahead of everyone.
Once it
So
got,
that's 600, 700 miles. That's about as many miles as I'd want to do in a day.
yeah, my typical road trip, that's what I do. It's about 600 miles at most, and then I call it a night.
Well, I have to say I do 1,000 miles and actually keep driving. It's just me using FSD. So I have times of like 36 hours from here in Atlanta to Palm Springs. but again, super crazy.
Yeah, my kids won't let me go that far. You see the car seats in the back. I'm lucky if I get a 500-mile road trip.
You leave, and after 2 minutes, you have to do a bathroom stop already.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Do you guys think you'd do anything differently if you guys were to do this all over again?
I don't know. We were talking about that a little bit offline. There may have been one or two charging stops where we did kind of a splash and dash, quick like 5-minute charge, where we might have been able to push longer at the previous charger and skip those spots, but I feel like it wouldn't have saved us much. 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes most, depending on bad stoplights and getting caught at a red. But that's variables of driving in any condition in any road trip. That's what was awesome about this is it was done in the real world. It wasn't a controlled environment. So everybody had to deal with real everyday road tripping experiences, which are stoplights, traffic, things that you get stuck behind a camper going 55 miles an hour and a 75 mile an hour. You can't
And
avoid those things.
wildlife.
Yeah, and wild, so many deer, especially in the middle of the night. Ugh, that was fun.
Gets a little scary. We're passing many deer. It's don't want anyone to jump out.
Yeah. Just full flocks of deer all over the road.
A couple of raccoons didn't survive, unfortunately.
So what was your guys' routine for sleeping, driving, or was it really just kind of on a whim?
I'll take this one, guys. I'm very fortunate. I'm lucky. I have a pretty easy time falling asleep. I'm also not very tall or big, so I was able to actually lay down in the backseat bench, get pretty comfortable, and I slept like 6-7 hours both nights. So it was fine for me.
Full night's rest.
Yeah,
What about you, Matt?
We would go through probably 2 charging stops, and Ryan would still be asleep in the back. And then, of course, we weren't taking it easy when we were leaving chargers. So it was get up to speed as quickly as possible, which is fantastic in a Plaid, doing 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. And every time I would gun it, and Ryan would be in the back bench sleeping, he would just start giggling in his sleep. And it was always so funny because it was predictable by the end of the trip. But for me, also Ryan was a savior for me because I have back issues, and he said, take the front seat, you're good. So I could stay in the front seat the majority of the trip, which I did. And thank you again, Ryan, for that, because that made it much more pleasurable for me. And we would rotate. We were stopping quick enough that it was a good hour and a half probably between each charging stop, just enough time to get a nap, get some sleep in, let the other people go and do our thing. And it worked out really well. We didn't really have a plan for it. It just turned into that, and it worked extremely well for our team.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Ryan, if we can say why or so. It's up to you. We ended up in this scenario, but it was Matt and I co-piloting through the night. And one thing I have to mention on this one is when I basically deliberately stayed up as much as I could to be of company, because nobody wants to drive sleeping people around and be slightly tired themselves too. And that came back to bite us because when we lost the repeater camera, we lost every sort of kind of assistance at this point. So we didn't have anything at all. So we had to keep the speed. And that was when I was taking over to drive, and I wasn't the freshest at this point to drive. But man, does it suck if you really have to drive and have to keep the speed. And it was raining, the visibility was bad, and you could hardly see the lines and so on. So it is very taxing to drive without any assistance for a long trip, especially if you haven't really slept well and so on. So that was not fun, I have to say.
Yeah, I think that's when we were going through Cleveland, I think.
I think that's right.
Yeah, and it was probably 4 a.m, and it was rough.
Yeah, I do wish there were some. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I wish there were a few times where I could have let both of you guys sleep a little bit more. I think there was like a leg or two where you guys were able to both get some rest in, but I think it would have been beneficial if we could have taken advantage of my sleeping a bit more. But you guys are troopers.
No problem.
It worked, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm loving the chemistry of the teams I see. It's definitely interesting seeing how everyone coordinates and communicates, and you guys got a good communication thing going. Before we kind of segue out, I want to know if you guys were to do this race again in another vehicle from this race, so whether it's the Taycan or the Lucid or the i7, which would you pick to do this I-90 surge again?
If we were racing?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I like to win, one. So,
Okay.
Taycan. But I also like comfort. So I'd be between the Lucid and the EQS. And the EQS from a standpoint of just pure comfort. I have to kick out the i7 because of the DC counter, even though it's more comfortable. But I think I'd be between the Lucid and the EQS. I would just want it to be in a different color.
You want the brown?
Yeah, no hearing aid beige. I don't need that.
Yeah,
I think I would probably end up going with the Model 3. I liked having the flexibility of being able to use Tesla or Electrify America. I don't think the Model 3 ended up using much Electrify America, but having the option is nice. And I like the seats in the Tesla. The new Model 3 has cooled seats, which is really nice. And something I'm familiar with, comfortable with. So I probably would be able to sleep in the back just like I did in the Plaid. Unfortunately, in the Taycan, there's like a hump in the seat. It's just I would not be able to actually lay down there. So that would be a deal breaker.
Yeah, for me, I like to win too in some way, but I get easily back pain in sedans, so the Taycan for that long would have been a bit painful, I believe, especially sitting in the back seat. And believe it or not, for me, it's a bit like I would have loved the Mercedes. I drove the Mercedes a bit, and it's really nice with the comfort and the heads-up display, and it is really awesome. I would want it to be in the G80 because I kind of prepared so much for it. I think it could have been better with a slightly different strategy in some way. I don't know. And I don't want to try to throw the guys under the bus and say they didn't know what they were doing. I wouldn't know what to do, but I think there was potential left perhaps on the G80 by reversing it because going to 80% and then drive to the next charger. The strategy for us was to come in as low as we can, but for the G80, it's a bit different in a way. It's kind of like charge up to 80 when it really falls off the cliff, and then go to the next charger. So you don't really have to worry about how much you will get there when you get there. So I don't know. I would have liked to try this maybe on just half the distance, not necessarily all the distance. But yeah, I don't know. G80 in a way or EQS.
Yeah, I will say this: I was blown away by when we got out of the Model S in Boston. I was blown away by how I had no body aches. I had no back pain. I am shocked at how comfortable that car was, being a car capable of 200 miles an hour, a car capable of doing 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, and we drove 3,100 miles in it, and it was very comfortable. I happen to know and happen to have both driven and ridden in some of the other cars that were even more comfortable than that. So I would do that trip again in a heartbeat in the Model S. There's no denying that. But I also like varying experiences. So it would be the Lucid or the Mercedes for me.
Awesome. Kind of just going back, I don't remember if I specifically asked this, but it was on the top of my mind. About the Model S. No, I think I did ask it. Okay. No, I think that's pretty much it. Did you guys have any other thoughts, closing remarks? I mean, I think the Model S fared pretty well. I was super surprised by how often I saw you guys. Now, we didn't stay for long, but there were many chargers where I'd see you guys for 3 minutes and then you guys were kind of off. But the race was a lot closer than I expected. What did you guys think about this entire thing?
For
Um,
me, go ahead, Andy.
Go ahead,
Actually,
Ryan.
all right, I'll take it. For me, it was really the breadth of capabilities. Of course, everyone's familiar with like the stats: 2 seconds to 60,000 horsepower, all that stuff. But I like to think about it like a spider graph, and it really feels like this Plaid is really good at pretty much everything. It's really fast, very capable. It's a great road tripper. It's comfortable. It just is very good at doing a lot of things. And yes, there are cars that are more comfortable or whatever, but the breadth of capability was something that was really impressive that really stuck with me.
Yeah, the fun part for me was at the individual charging stops running into everybody else and seeing who we were going to be coming up. I feel like we ended up leapfrogging with the Lucid at least 10 times in the whole race, either on the road or at chargers. Um, it's a shame that, that they ended up running out. And of course, everybody knows it happens. It happened to them. And I really would have liked to have seen where they could have ended up finishing and where we were at. What shocked me, I think, out of it all was how the Ionic was behind us for a good half of the race, and then towards the end, I don't know if they got dialed in or just our excessive needs for stopping for charging so quickly, just kind of got in the way. But all of a sudden, they just passed us, and we had no chance of catching them again. But there was that group of kind of 4 cars where we're all just right there, pretty much hitting every charger at the same time. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say is, if you think about it, there was a middle field besides the old Model S and the Taycan. We all kind of played in the middle. And again, if you wouldn't road trip the way we road trip, you really can kind of pick a car that you are comfortable with at this point. And I also think it was really good to have the gas model, a gas powered car versus the very old Model S, so that people can actually make, a more educated pick at this point. There might be people that say, oh, I buy an EV and I buy this old Model S because it's only so and so much, and then I get free supercharging and I can drive cross country. Mm, wait a minute, you stop really often and for very long. And I think that's very good that this was being part of it, so that people are not thinking, oh, I buy any EV and I get the same sort of result. So that was very good. And altogether, I think, like I said earlier, EVs are very road trippable at this point. And again, I'm doing road trips 3 times a year, going from Atlanta to Palm Springs, and I don't even think about it at this point anymore. Like, will I be able to charge and what's going on and so on? It's not on my mind, none whatsoever. And I think that's crystal clear at this point. You have a very valid option with an EV, and this whole you can't charge and it takes forever and, and so on is just out the window.
14-minute charging stops on average.
Awesome. No, I want to kind of talk about that Ionic 6 for a second before we go. So towards the end, not much really changed from their start, but definitely towards the end here, right? They started charging 0% arrival, 6%, 1%, 5%, 3%, versus before you can kind of see, I mean, still they were being a little risky, but a little higher, right? 12, 5, 8, their averages. So I think maybe that end there, they were just being a little bit more risky. But I'll have to watch that episode again to really see what happened, because we were following the Ioniq and Team EQS really side by side. I mean, we would arrive at the Charger within 5 minutes of each other, and absolutely out of nowhere, the Ioniq just blasted past. And yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Oh, one more thing I wanted to say, which might not be known to people. Even though it was a race and everybody tried the best to win it, we did not sabotage. We actually helped each other. And, like Jordan was telling me, don't stop at this supercharger, it's derated and so on. And it's all, like nobody was happy when we heard that the Lucid was running out. It's not like, haha, awesome or so. It's kind of like it was almost like, oh man, so now we don't know where they would be, positioned in the end. And that's what I really liked on this whole trip, that it wasn't about, breaking somebody's leg or cutting a supercharger cable or whatever. It was just about whatever you can do to win, but it's all fair. And we helped each other too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's racing the cars, not racing other people.
Right.
It did renew the energy in the car a little bit, because all of a sudden we went from, third place is now in shot, and then we never caught the Ioniq.
Yeah, but the odometer was broken on the EQS too. This speedometer. So
yeah, we were going a little fast at times, but yeah, no, that was a great race. And honestly, yes, it was truly a friendly rivalry in sorts, but it was still trying to help each other and really prove what the cars are capable of versus what we can do. Because at the end of the day, it's to show that an average person can take this car and they can literally drive across the country with ease. And that's really just categorizing which is better at what. But look, thank you guys so much again for taking time out of your day. I know the schedule's been a bit wonky. I had Ioniq as well as GV80 before this, and we were just talking, and things took forever. So I want to thank you guys again for your patience. I had an awesome talk with you guys. The chemistry was great. And yeah, look, this is Team Model S Plaid. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, viewers and listeners. If you guys want to learn more about them, all of their links and information will be in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is the Out of Spec Podcast, and we hope to see you guys in the next I-90 Surge recap.